Welcome back to my channel for a super exciting Leica episode. I'm here at the Leica headquarters in Wetzlar, the Leica Campus, and with me is the brand new Leica SL3. That's the new Leica SL3, the next generation of system cameras from Leica with improved autofocus, improved design, an improved graphical user interface, improved, what have you. A lot of things to tell in this video. Let's kick this off. This is the beautiful Leica Campus in Wetzlar, Germany, starting with the Vienna House, Ernst Leitz Hotel. Then we have here the Ernst Leitz Museum, the museum shop, and the Leica store Wetzlar. Beautiful selection and supply of everything you definitely want to have. Here's the building for their Cine program. If you turn around to the other side of the street, we have all kinds of buildings. And here is the main building, which I think is very well known. And it hosts the Leica Store Classic as well as the laboratories where they cook up all these gadgets and gear we love so much. So let's have a look here in a bit more detail. Just beautiful, and it's a privilege to be here and being one of the first to shoot the new Leica SL3. If you look at the camera body from a distance, you don't immediately spot differences. It looks really like a Leica SL2. Of course, you find an engraving here which says Leica SL3, and that's to be expected. But in general, it's the camera body we are familiar with. And that's actually the good thing. There's a lot of evolution going on from the Leica SL2 to the Leica SL3, but it is familiar. It's home territory. You don't feel like a stranger when you have a shooting experience with that camera. But there are lots of differences which you already see in design. First of all, the on-off switch here is no longer that switch you are used, which you push up or push down. It really has a button. And if you press it, the camera switches on. The switch on time also is super fast. And I, of course, appreciate that. If you're charging, by the way, and I will show this in a subsequent video where I do a detailed comparison of the Leica SL2 with the Leica SL3, so stay tuned and don't miss that content. If you charge the battery in the camera, that here turns into green and starts breathing. And if the charging process is completed, it stops breathing. So there's also functionality built in. It's not only design. Let's switch this off for a moment. There are more design differences, of course. So what we always had on the Leica SL2 is here a display. That's the top display. And we had here a control wheel, which was also programmable. And we also had always a rear control wheel here. And that's nice, of course, that they kept it in the way it was. But here, that space here on the left-hand side at the top of the camera was empty. And now we get here an additional control wheel. And that is, of course, super useful. There are lots of functions you can assign to these control wheels. And one more control wheel is always better. The play button, the function button, and the menu button are now on the right-hand side. And in this way, get in reach of your thumb. And that is convenient. Let's say you have your pointing finger on the shutter release button. You can also use the pointing finger to operate that control wheel at the right-hand side at the top of the camera body. And your thumb to operate here the rear control wheel. Then your thumb can now also operate here the play button, the function button, and the menu button. And that is, of course, quite useful. Finally, we have a flip screen, and that is, of course, also appreciated. You can tilt this in all different directions. This is, for instance, for an overhead shooting. This is if you go for a waist level shooting here. If you look at that, very convenient. You can, for instance, in this way, shoot animals at the height of their eyes. Very good. The joystick, which I typically operate with my thumb, is sitting where it used to sit on the Leica SL2. Here's a customizable function button as we had it before, which I think in the default assignment of functionality is switching between the LCD and the electronic viewfinder, but you can assign other functions to that button here. We have two customizable function buttons at the top and two on the front side, which I typically operate here with my pointing finger. You see them here, and there are functions you can assign to these buttons. And you can in this way customize the camera individually for your personal workflow, which I always appreciate, and also have a couple of tutorials on how to do it on my channel. The top control display is still what we had before, and that's convenient for the most important shooting parameters. But the design, if we look into the way information is represented here, has been changed by a complete revamping of icons and the graphical user interface of the camera, which will be the next topic, what's coming in this video here when we switch the camera on. So let's switch the camera on and let's have a look into the menu. Here is perspective control currently activated because we are going to shoot on the Leica Campus in a moment. And if I go into the menu, you have no longer what's called the status screen. It's now called the control screen, and it's much more tidy, is much more clean, and in a way very easy to operate. And also on the menu, you see that a lot of things, including all the icons, have been changed. And Leica spent quite some time with us today explaining how they changed the graphical design of the user interface in the camera. If you operate the camera via the LCD or the electronic viewfinder and then use the control element to make changes to settings. Let's talk about specifications of that new family member of the Leica SL lineup. First of all, the Leica SL3 has a new 60 megapixel sensor. It's a CMOS sensor, backside illuminated, and it supports triple resolution technology, which we know already from the Leica M11, M11P, and the Leica Q3. So you can decide whether you want to shoot with 60 megapixel, 36 megapixel, or 18 megapixel, whatever suits better your workflow. We have an improved dynamic range of that new sensor from the Leica SL2 with 14 f-stops to 15 f-stops now on the Leica SL3. We have a new image processor, and the one in the SL3 is the same that's sitting in the Q3 and is the Leica Maestro 4. And that, of course, increases the transfer rates, the speed. Everything is processed quicker, looks better, and is processed in a way like we know it already from the fantastic Leica Q3. And by the way, you find a lot of videos on my channel, the Leica Q3. If you have not seen them and you want to watch them, that gives you a first good glimpse on what the sensor and image processor in the Leica SL3 is capable of. We have a fully weather-sealed body, and it adheres to the IP54 standard. We have upgraded interfaces in the ports. I'll show this in my comparison, in my detailed comparison between the Leica SL2 and the Leica SL3. So we have higher transfer rates, higher speed. There will be a new version of the Leica Photos app, so you can have much higher transfer rates and the workflow will be much smoother. We saw a demonstration here at Leica how quickly you can actually transfer DNG full-size files from the camera to your smartphone, and that works like a charm. We have in-body image stabilization, also works very well. I tried this out already. And we have a different set of card slots. We have now Compact Flash Express Type B and SD UHS 2. We have the same electronic viewfinder as what we had before, but the backside LCD has been a little bit upgraded. We have upgrades in the video capabilities because here we can now shoot on the SL3 up to 8K. And that's, by the way, remarkable in a smaller camera body. What I just wanted to quickly show here is if I'm at that screen here and I go into video, just showing you very quickly now in the menu that we really have 8K here on that camera. I will cover that in more detail in subsequent videos. If you go to video profiles here, let's go to profile number 1, for instance. Let's go into that. And then you see I can now choose here, for instance, cinematic 8K. I have full 8K and so on. So the video capabilities have been remarkably pushed up. And we have the same upgrade on the battery, which we saw already on the Leica Q3. So compared to the SL2 batteries, where we had 1,860 milliampere hours, we have now 2,200 milliampere hours, which is the same as I showed in my videos on the Leica Q3. So a really good, solid package of upgrades. As I said before, improved, improved, improved all over the place. For the Leica SL3, Leica spent a lot of time coming up with a new graphical user interface. Icons have been changed. The way this is represented here in the menu has been changed. And by the way, if I go back to what's been called previously the status screen, this is now a true and fully fledged control screen. And in the elements on the previous status screen on the SL2, you could not customize them, but here I can customize them. So for instance, here on this one, if I tap once, I can change my settings for large, medium size, small size, DNG, and JPEG. And if I tap and hold it, it gives me other options. So I can also say I want to have here, let's say, the sensor format. I activate it, and then you see change now. I can now toggle between 35mm and APS-C. And you can fully customize this in the way I'm just demonstrating here. Custom buttons on the camera can be changed as it used to be the way on the SL2. If I have a function button here, here, or also on the front side, I can customize them by press and hold. First of all, let's go here. If I press that custom button here, it's going into my ISO settings. I can change it here. Let's go back. If I press and hold, it's giving me a list of different functions I can assign to that function button. For instance, let's go to exposure compensation. If I now press that button here, it gives me the exposure compensation scale here and metric, which is of course very nice. Let's go back to ISO, press and hold, go to ISO, simple like that. If I press that custom button, it gets me into the ISO settings. Very simple, very intuitive, and of course in the menu, you can also select what appears in that list if you press and hold the button. Let's do this again. Currently, this is a very long list, but you can actually select and deselect what's appearing in that list. And I will do a fully fledged tutorial on the menu system and all the functions of the Leica SL3 in the next week. Of course, I have to get used to in my tutorials and videos on the Leica SL3 from now on, avoiding the word status screen and calling it the control screen. And it is a control screen in the meaning of the word because you can customize these 8 placeholders. Pressing the menu button once and then repeatedly gets me here with an indicator through the different pages of the menu. Everything is very tidy, very clean. It's much easier, and it used to be much easier to operate in the menu system, a Leica SL2, than for instance a Sony a7R5, because everything is just very quickly at your disposal. And of course, you can also go through all these pages and then it changes here if you come to the next page in the way I'm just demonstrating here via the joystick. Let me share one more detail which shows the love and care Leica invested in that camera. And we talked already about the new design of the on-off switch here and that white LED ring, which is breathing in green if the battery is charged in camera. And Chris from Chris Photography just yesterday shared with me another feature which I didn't discover myself, but it shows how much detail Leica invested in that camera. So this is glowing as a white LED whenever you have your eye not on the electronic viewfinder, but if you approach your eye to the viewfinder, let's do this here, then both are switched off and deactivated, the LCD as well as this LED ring here around the on-off switch. And how nice is that? Of course, if your eye is on the electronic viewfinder, you will not be able to see the LCD and you will not be able to see that glowing LED ring here. So they switch it off in order to reduce power consumption. It's just an example of how much love and care into details Leica invested in that new Leica SL3. I like a lot what I'm seeing here. Now, of course, you cannot introduce a new camera and not talk about image quality. And there will be more videos in the next weeks and months where I will talk about the new Leica SL3. But here at least I want to share some sample images from that shooting we had in the car museum, as well as a few images which I took on campus walking around in breaks between the events. And you see here the headquarters from Leica in the background, pinpoint sharp, looks really good. As I showed earlier in the video, I had perspective control on, and that played out quite nicely. So here, for instance, you see these are the Ernst Leitz Werkstätten. And what I wanted to point out here, perspective control is such a convenient feature. If you go into the develop section, and I click here, then you see the lines, the correction lines, the perspective correction lines, which the camera itself did set for me. And if I switch this off, then, it looks definitely totally different. So I was just pointing up with my camera. I made sure that around that building, I have sufficient space for the corrections. And then if I activate in Lightroom, which is transported through the metadata, the perspective control, then the camera gets this right by itself. And that looks really good. Here's a piece of art on the Leica Campus, which I liked. And of course, that mirror here distorts the Leica world here. And again, you see this is super sharp, super crisp, no matter where you go in the image. And that actually is what I'm used to from my Leica Q3 because it's the same sensor. Going to the next image, we have here the Cine building. And if you look here, for instance, look at these monitoring and surveillance cameras here. Every detail is there. It's pinpoint sharp. Then here again, the headquarters. I don't want to go into that. Here, the Ernst Leitz Hotel again. That's the place where most of the guests were staying. Buses in the foreground.
You see it catches so many details with 60 megapixel, very nice. And here, a last image from that beautiful main building here, where they actually design and manufacture the cameras and all the lenses, if they are not made in Portugal. The Leica SL3, as I showed before in a quick screenshot from the event and the briefing, is 100% made in Germany. So this camera is built here in that building, and you can trust the quality coming from that manufacturing process. Then finally, the car museum, that really was an available light situation. And the ISO of the camera, I had the camera on auto ISO and was shooting in aperture priority, climbed up very quickly to higher levels. So here's an ISO of 4000. Nevertheless, this image is super sharp. And only if you go to dark areas, like here maybe, you see that there is a little bit of noise and grain, but the noise is very homogeneous. It's actually not killing the image. And I like that a lot. It's something I've only observed with the Leica monochrome cameras, where the noise is so pleasant that you even wish for some noise. And here it looks really good. I think this is a really good image in terms of noise behavior, besides the fact that I was shooting here with an ISO of 4000. Let's continue here. So here's another interesting image where you can see that noise. This is now shot at an ISO of 12,500. And if I crop in here to 100%, it still looks pleasant because the noise here does not take away any details. And as I said before, it's very homogeneous and in a way that it doesn't disturb the image at all. And there is a reason why in some post-processing software, you can artificially add noise and grain to images. It looks very natural, it looks good. And the homogeneous character of the noise on that Q3 Leica SL3 sensor is really, really pleasant. I don't have a problem with it, but if you don't like it, you can nevertheless hex it away. Let me go to some other image which I wanted to show. Let's go to these two images. Let me take both of them. Let me grab them and put them side by side. And then let me tell the story about that. So here we go. So this is shot at an ISO of 12,500 and 1/125 seconds, widest open f2.8. So pretty high ISO value, 12,500. If you look into that, on the right-hand side is the image without noise post-processing in Lightroom. And as I said before, it's a very pleasant noise you see here. The image is pinpoint sharp. I was very likely zooming in here with my 70 millimeter, so I didn't mention yet, but we could choose lenses, and I thought I want to shoot at different focal lengths. So I was choosing the standard zoom 24 to 70 millimeter, constant aperture of f2.8. And this was shot widest open here with f2.8. And very likely at a 70 millimeter focal length. And if you look at that, if I really get disturbed by the noise on the right-hand side, although I personally think it's pleasant to have it, you can clean it up in Lightroom with the new AI noise filter, and you don't lose the details if you look at that. The left-hand side image has not less sharpness, but you basically get rid of the grain if you don't like that. I don't mind to have it. I think it's natural to have a little bit of grain in an image, and I can fairly well live with it. Now, another point I wanted to make is in-body image stabilization. And if you are in a low light location and you have fast moving subjects, of course, you need to have a faster shutter speed, and then you will have naturally a higher ISO value when you shoot. If you don't have moving subjects in the scene, like here, this is a still scene of, by the way, the dinner location we had later that evening, I can actually use and leverage the camera's in-body image stabilization for a slower shutter speed and then get my ISO value down. And this image here is, first of all, stopped down to f8.0. I wanted to have a wide depth of field. It's an ISO of only 400 compared to the large numbers of ISO I presented before. And it's shot handhold at 1.3 seconds. And here, the IBIS fully plays out its strength. If you look at that image, this is really, really sharp. Looks really good. You get all the details in the image, and it has a lower ISO value of 400. So I'm very happy with that image. And that's something you can even further leverage if you have an even wider angle. So if you shoot with the new Super Aposoomicron 21mm, for instance, that is a fantastic combination with the Leica SL3 for handhold shooting in low light. If you don't have moving subjects in the scene, or if you don't mind having some motion blurriness from moving persons or animals in the image. What I also find very impressive on that particular image here is how the colors come across. And that's really the way I saw the scene, the shooting location with my naked eyes. And Leica has their own proprietary color science in the same way as Hasselblad, for instance, has their Hasselblad natural color solution. And Phase 1 have their own calibration. You know, Fuji have their own calibration on colors, and in particular certain film simulations coming from their film rolls back then. Leica has their own proprietary technology here, and this fully plays back. This is the way the shooting location was appearing to me when I looked at it live at the shooting, and it looks really good. Very nice image. Low light shooting with the Leica SL3, 100% recommendation, in particular if you go for a wide angle lens and can leverage and use the in-body image stabilization with at least 5 stops. It was not fully clear to me in the presentation, is it 5 stops or 6 stops? It's at least 5. That's what I can confirm here. Same story using the in-body image stabilization here. This was shot stop down, f8.0, ISO 400, 1/4 seconds. And the image is sharp. You see, by the way, here a YouTuber sitting here and taking shots. And here you see what I talked about before, namely motion blurriness. That person here is moving. 1/4 of a second is not fast enough, so we get motion blurriness in the image. Here again, the color, very nice, comes across exactly in the way I saw it with my naked eyes. And here again, motion blurriness, right? This was shot at half a second at f8.0, ISO 400. I was for a while keeping that setting in order to play with the IBIS and see how it's performing. And you see here, this is really sharp, really nice, well done. Here another image in that group of people, again, half a second exposure time. You see if they are standing still, crispiness and sharpness. If they are moving a little bit, you see motion blurriness, but the rest is super sharp. Look at that graffiti here on the wall back here. And that looks really, really good at half a second handhold. I didn't take a tripod with me to shoot with the Leica SL3 on that shooting location because I wanted to test out how the IBIS is performing in this new system camera from Leica. I think I conclude sample images here. There's more to come in the next weeks and months. A lot I have to test out with that new camera, of course. Here's some fellow YouTubers. This was shot 1/40 seconds, and the guy was quite focused and concentrated. That's why you actually don't have any motion blurriness here. Here also the same group of YouTubers at work. Nice image, ISO 400. This time shot widest open, f2.8 and 1/15 seconds. Here another car. And look at that Lamborghini sign here. Very sharp. And again, an ISO of 400 here, and so on and so on. There is a lot more to show in the next weeks. And I think on sample images, that's it. Should be enough. I hope I could convince you. So high ISO shooting, no problem. Image quality, sharpness, exactly what we are used to from the Leica Q3. In-body image stabilization, terrific performance. Half a second handhold shooting with a wide angle lens, no problem at all. You will enjoy shooting that camera once you get it in your hands. All right, I think that's it. That's my intro to the new Leica SL3, and the next video we'll see from me is a detailed side-by-side comparison of the Leica SL2 and the new Leica SL3. The only thing I want to add at the end of the video now are some data points which came up in the Q&A session with Leica. And first of all, one question I had, of course, is what's the base ISO for still images? And the base ISO is 100 and not 50 as you might expect. Let's go here into that. And you see 50 is the lowest ISO value. It goes up all the way to 100,000. And the base ISO is not the same as the lowest ISO setting you can choose here. It's not 50, not 64, not 80, but it's 100. Then we have a dual ISO sensor in the way as we had it on some previous Leica cameras, and the ISO of 100 as well as the ISO of 400 should give you the same quality of images, which is quite nice to know, of course, for your shooting and the way you set your parameters. I mentioned the triple resolution already. Leica is a little bit vague on whether this is really a pixel binning that's going on, and I have a couple of videos on that topic on my channel where I did my own research on the triple resolution sensor, but it's there and you can use it. Then we had a question on the new battery versus the old battery. So you can use the old batteries with 1860 milliampere hours from the Leica SL2 and the Leica Q2 in the Leica SL3 in the same way as you can use it on the Leica Q3, as I showed in one of my videos. But there are restrictions. If you use the reduced capacity battery, you will automatically get a warning and reduced video resolution. And you will also have a reduced burst rate in continuous shooting. So if you really want to unfold the full potential of this new Leica SL3, then you better use the newer batteries with 2200 milliampere hours. During my test shooting, I was scrolling through the menu and watching out for content authenticity capabilities in the same way we have it on the Leica M11 and M11P
for content protection, and I didn't find it. So this question also came up in the Q&A with the Leica experts, and the answer whether this camera has or will get once in the future CAI, the answer to that is no. Because in contrast to the Leica M11, when CAI became mature, the SL3 already was in an advanced development stage, and CAI actually needs a hardware chip. It's not only software, so it cannot be upgraded by a firmware upgrade. It really needs a hardware chip, and that hardware chip issues a code tied to the serial number of the camera. And for the SL3, it was just too late. Development was too much advanced, whereas on the M11, they could still build in this hardware chip and then also provide the corresponding software. So for the SL3, the train left the station. There will be no content authenticity capabilities, content protection in the way we have it on the M11, on the Leica SL3. That's something they will not show us before in some years. They will give us a Leica SL4. The next topic is a new feature that concerns standby and was also quickly discussed, brought up by Chris from Chris Photography in the Q&A session, and that's the new standby mode. If you tap that on-off switch very quickly, it actually puts the camera in standby mode. And that is super convenient because you can wake it up by then pressing again the shutter release button. And you see it's instantaneously. There is no delay, no hesitation of the camera. It really goes very, very quickly. And it's super convenient to not having automatic standby, but whenever you are not shooting with the camera, to put it into standby mode and then wake it up very quickly with a gentle push on the shutter release button. Another detail which shows the love and care and the thought Leica invested in that new camera is if you go into standby mode, that LED will be switched off after a few seconds too, because you don't need an indication that the camera is on any longer. So let's demonstrate this. Push it, camera goes into standby mode, it's still glowing, now it's switched off and the power consumption is reduced to a minimum. It will drain the battery a bit, that came up in the Q&A, but only in a way that, you know, if you are longer in standby mode, you might lose up to 10 or 20 images shooting capability in terms of power consumption, but not dramatically. So this really is a way to save power and to extend your battery to a longer workflow time if you use that standby functionality, waking it up again by a gentle tap on the shutter release button. Very nice, very well thought through by Leica. Another interesting question that came up in the Q&A is, why is there only a vertical tilt here and not a horizontal tilt? Or then, you know, if you horizontally tilt it, a rotation by 180 degrees to enable selfie shooting with the camera in video mode. And the answer to that was twofold. First of all, it's about durability. And second, they were on the LCD screen focusing on the workflow typical still image shooters have. And the SL3 already is a little bit thicker than the SL2, although in the horizontal and vertical dimension, it's more compact. And they said another layer of functionality, mechanics basically behind that LCD screen would have not really fit into the concept they had for the Leica SL3. And that's why we only have here a vertical tilt. For me, that's good enough. I showed that at an earlier point in the video. I don't need the horizontal tilt, but for some people, this might be a compromise. All right, I think that's enough for an introductory video. I hope you got good impressions about this brand new Leica SL3. It really is a fantastic camera, but I will deliver much more in order to show you the capabilities of this camera. And as I said, the side-by-side comparison very soon with the Leica SL2. If you liked that video, don't forget to drop me a thumbs up. Stay tuned on my channel. There's always more to come. Thanks for watching. Stay safe and healthy. And of course, peace out.